Good morning, or almost afternoon. I'm Mark Lubell. A few years ago, the nerd herd came to me and said, "Hey, we think people matter." And I said, "Yeah, I think that's probably true, so I might as well join you guys and give me a week and I'll write some stuff into your grants." And we came up with this idea of the survey and a whole project that's geared towards understanding how the human side and social side of these systems are integrated with the more agroecological side, so the social ecological system component. And the first thing that we did around this, do I have a clicker here? Yeah. The first thing that we did around this is do a survey of ranchers in California in partnership with the California Cattlemen's Association. How many of you in the room have filled out the survey and sent it in? So great, thank you very much. If you'd encourage, we have about 1/3 of the ranchers in California who answered the survey. This is an example of it here. I can pass it around. You can take a look. I'd like to have this back at the end of the day. There's no names or anything on this, so you can take a look at what the survey looked like and what some of the people wrote. So we wanted to understand, we were interested in understanding decision-making goals of the ranchers. We're interested in identifying the variables that lead to the integration of ecosystem services into this overall idea of adaptive rangeland management. And then from the social science perspective, we wanted to sort of develop a conceptual framework by which we can sort of understand this process. And this is sort of a first cut at what such a conceptual framework might look like. So if you take it, this is sort of focused on an individual rancher or agricultural decision maker and what we think might be driving some of the decision making. So at the center of this is economics. And the idea that ranching is a business, agriculture is a business. You need to be sustainable. You obviously need to make some money at it, and to have the economics part, what you have to do is be adaptive in the sense of dealing with spatial and temporal variability every year, every season. So you're managing your enterprise in order to put the practices in place to meet your management goals, and you're dealing with interannual variation rain, spatial variability over watershed, over your operation, and all of that. Okay, but at the same time, you've got different social values. Different ranchers have different social values. Different managers, if you're for conservation land, for example, may have different social values that influence how they think about the economics and goals. And you're also linked with lots of other people, lots of other organizations that share information with you, that tell you about different practices, that may persuade you one way or another about what your values should be with respect to the land. And of course, you are exposed to policies of various sorts, incentives, regulations that also shape the way you make decisions. All these translate into your management goals. Do you like carbon sequestration or not? Are you interested in water quality or not? Which then translate into your strategies and practices. You know, are you doing rotational grazing or some other sort of grazing strategy? What sort of actual practices are you using as far as herd management? And then all those combine to the various economic, ecological, and social outcomes that we've talked a lot about today, of trade-offs of various sorts. And then the adaptive part is that you have to learn over time, right? These things are changing over time, that all the different parameters that are structuring the decision making are changing over time, and people have to figure out exactly how to make those choices and learn about it over time. So the survey process, we partner with the California Cattlemen's Association, and if you look on the front of that survey as it goes around, you'll see we had a lot of other partners. We did a lot of outreach to try to get as much participation in this survey as we could. We sent it out to all of the regular members of the California Cattlemen's Association, which Tracy's here, and perhaps some other folks from the California Cattlemen's Association, but the regular members are sort of the ones that have self-identified as rangeland managers of some sort. Maybe you have multiple people from the same enterprise or family that are in there. Sorry. And we designed the survey by going on a bunch of ranches and talking to folks about their management decisions and our goals, along with, you know, an advisory committee of extension people and other sorts of experts. So the survey was really combed through thoroughly to try to eliminate as many of the red flags as we possibly could before we sent it out, make sure it was relevant to what's going on the ground for people to understand the questions and stuff like that. And we never get these things perfect. One thing that I say in survey research is that I guarantee you will go back and say, why did you ask that question and why didn't you ask that question? That's a guarantee. It happens every single time. And I'd like to know about that, actually. So as you're looking at these results or this survey or anything, come to me or any of our team and tell me what you think we screwed up so that we know it and don't keep screwing it up in the future or as we report these results, because there's something that we need to fix for sure. So it was, as I said, it was promoted very heavily all over the place. I'll show you one result that I think we're going to call it the Tracy Shore effect, right? Because she did an excellent job of promoting and encouraging some of her peers to participate. So that's, you see the cover of the survey, and this is the, you know, all the sponsors, and we had sort of tried to make it look not like an IRS form or not like a USDA Ag Census form, which I'm sure some of you guys have looked at, and it's very complex. I was at a meeting the other day, just for comparison's sake. I was at a meeting the other day. They were telling me, the USDA National Ag Statistics people were telling me what they do for their survey process, and they said, "Oh yeah, we spend 4 hours in people's farms." And I said, 4 hours? That's just crazy. So, you know, we tried to make this something that people could do in 20 minutes or on average. So that's one of the trade-offs you have to deal with. Speaking of trade-offs, we got about, once you dealt with ineligible respondents, about 33% response rate. So 1 out of 3 ranchers in California with 475 total responses. So, you know, we would obviously I would hope for a 50% response rate if I was going to be very happy with it. 33%, I consider myself feeling pretty good about it. We can say something interesting without getting into a giant problem. If I was a statistics professor who had never ever done field research in my entire life, I might have to have 100% to feel like my statistics are absolutely correct, but that's why they're in the textbooks and we're in the field. This is the distribution of responses. This is where all the zip codes were. The darker green is where there's more actual people that we sent it to, and this is the responses. And you see, you know, a little bit of underrepresentation on the coast and maybe some of the inland Southern California, but pretty good representation through the middle of the state, and maybe a little more than you might expect as far as response rate goes up in these lighter green here. But as far as the overall spatial distribution, I'm pretty happy with it, that we got a pretty good picture of what's going on across the range of the state as far as where people are doing ranching. So let's talk about some of the demographics that I should say that right now I'm basically going to show you the descriptive statistics, just the basic frequencies, means, and averages and stuff like that. None of the more fancy multivariate statistics to look at associations and stuff like that, because we're just starting to get into this data. So any ideas that you have about what we ought to do with this data is something I'm happy to hear as well. So demographics reflect people's values, reflect in the structure of their operation, often reflects the types of economic constraints they're facing. So let's take a look at some of those. On average, about 61 years old, 16% female, 51% of folks with a 4-year degree or higher, so at least some college, a third from rural backgrounds, 19% claiming they're the first rancher in the family, and this might be the Tracy Shore effect here. I'll show you it again. A modal household income, total income of $50,000 to $99,000 a year. So that's like we gave them categories to choose from, and then you know, around 50, more than 50% on average in terms of off-ranch income. So, you know, ranching is a job that requires lots of different economic activities mixed together to be viable. Generations of ranching. We have lots of generations. Ranching has been around in California for a long time. So, a lot of the largest percentage of respondents have been ranching in California for 3 generations. So I was trying to figure out exactly what that might be, but I'm guessing that dates the ranch back to the late 1900s, late 1800s, early 1900s, in terms of like when the family first started going. If you think sort of generations of say 50, 60 years, and then some a little bit older, and then there was a bump here a lot of people saying they're first generation ranchers, they're the first ones in their family to do it. So I'm not quite sure if this represents a cohort of new people who are entering versus a response rate issue there, and it's probably going to be hard to know. Fortunately, our goal isn't really to get at the age and a real accurate description of the age structure or the generational structure. But it's an interesting variable to look at. Here's some of the acres. So we have range on private. We asked them, do they have private owned land, private lease, public lease? What do they hire? This is one of the really interesting things about ranching. Really, all agriculture in California and most places in the United States, I would argue, is that, and you guys all know this, but if you go out to talk to some person in Los Angeles who doesn't know even where their food comes from and say, what's a farmer, what's a rancher, they're thinking of some person on one piece of land, maybe a nice horse or something like that, and a tractor. But in reality, the enterprises in many cases are very complex, multiple parcels, multiple pieces of the state, a mixture between private and public land, all of that stuff mixed together to try to have it go at it at an enterprise level. So we have a diversity of that in terms of some very large private land to very small, leased, same thing. This is the total acreage summed up. We have some folks who are running cattle on very large pieces of swaths of public lands, up to hundreds of thousands of acres of leased public land. This number I'm not quite sure about. I got to go back and look at this one. That could be right, because when I first saw this number, I wrote to Ken. I said, this can't possibly be right. It's a huge chunk of land. And he gave me this map of all the Forest Service grazing allotments and how many acres it possibly covers, and that's potentially an accurate number. I first thought it was a typo, but somebody actually wrote these things in there. Lots of different other things going on the land, as I mentioned before. So a lot of people doing other agricultural production and extractive recreation, hunting and fishing of some sort, and mixers of other stuff. So non-extractive recreation, energy development of various sorts. This is probably we're planning on doing this in Wyoming, so it might be more. We have an average of different types of livestock. We have dairy cattle, sheep, Calcap operations, stocker operations of various sizes, as you might expect. We have most of the people in the coastal mountains in the Central Valley, some Sierra Nevada foothills. We asked a lot about, and we said, because of the complexity of the operations, we said, we want you to tell us the most about your largest privately owned parcel. Right, so we didn't, when we asked them management goals and practices, we didn't say, what are you doing on your public land? What are you doing in your leased private land? We said, focus on your largest privately owned parcel as sort of the base ranch, the base of your operation. So what are the different goals? We're interested in how those different goals the different management goals that people have. One of the interesting thing about goals is that when you're thinking about this adaptive management idea and the fact that you have to customize practices to a specific place and time, it might be difficult to just sort of count up the number of practices that a person has and say this rancher is doing really good at providing ecosystem service and this person is not carefully managing, because people have to mix and match in lots of different ways. So if you have a particular goal in mind, the way you achieve that goal could be different. So it's on different pieces of land, so it's important to look at the goals themselves. So we asked them to rank a bunch of the goals you can see on one of the pages in the survey, and this is a little hard to see, sorry about the font, but this is livestock in the average ranking. So if you come in first, you're the best. If you come in, like in a race, and if you come in, so the lower number is the more important ranking. So this is livestock production, forage production, water quality is third, invasive weed management is fourth, soil health is fifth, riparian and meadow health is sixth, wildlife and recreation 7th and 8th, and carbon sequestration, interestingly, is at the very bottom. We had a lot of discussion about already in this session about carbon sequestration and the interest in it and people doing scientific work on it, but it ranks very low as far as the overall goals of in the ranching community in California. So I'd be interested, those folks who are interested in carbon sequestration, I would like to hear why you have become interested in it, because you're in a minority as far as the survey goes. So these surveys can be unpredictable. We have places where people can write open-ended responses, and even where they write it, we ask them to write down numbers. Sometimes they write things to us. So this is, instead of ranking the goals, this person wrote this: forage production, which is synonymous with livestock production; invasive weed management, which is made difficult because of over-regulation on use of herbicides; wildlife, which is a fun part of ranching; soil health and water quality are interrelated to each other and to number 1 above. I have no riparian and meadow areas. Carbon sequestration is Al Gore bullcrap. Being a rancher is all the recreation I need. And then we asked if you have any additional goals, paying the bills. So if that's sort of a, in a sense, captures some of the flavor of the statistics that we're getting. So there's lots of different practices. I'm kind of running out of time here, but there's different reasons for knowing about different practices, and this is some of the practices that we had to measure. The yellow ones are sort of herd management practice. This is a percentage of the people who have used it in the past 5 years. This is sort of the herd management ones, and facilities and infrastructure ones are in green. So livestock, drinking water development, cross fencing to create small pastures, which presumably the people are rotating around. The herd management ones are number 1. Some of the in terms of managing plant species, you have grazing, herbicides, and land clearing to deal with plant species. They have some wildlife habitat stuff going on. And then at the bottom here, using fire, planting native plants, and planting non-native plant species as land management is not something people do a lot. A little bit surprising to me is not a lot of livestock trail development going on. Hopefully a land manager can tell me what the story is behind that. But you see that sort of distribution. So one of the things we'll be interested in is linking these practices to people's goals. We also, I'll skip that. This is what things that people want more information about are correlated with the things they use the most. I guess not too surprisingly. The strategies grazing strategies that people use, not just the practices, but the way they move their animals on the land, how they rest it, how they rotate, when the seasons in the graze. I'll show you a little bit about that. We have a whole page on that, which was an interesting debate about how to do that. It was probably one of our most difficult tasks in the survey, is try to get a handle on that, where we might run into most of our problems. But we asked them on their private land, for example, which seasons they graze in. And then most people on their private land, largest parcel, they're grazing their animals on 4 seasons. And they're spreading it out a decent amount, but focusing in the spring and the winter. But then on the public lands that they lease, for those people who have public lands, they're focusing mostly on 1 season. So they're using it as sort of to supplement what they're doing on their private lands. And then they are having they're spreading it out. There's a spike in the summer, and I was expecting this. I'm not quite sure what's going on here. Ken or other folks can probably tell me where the sort of winter grazing on public lands is occurring, if that's a coastal issue or something like that, and we can look at the data more closely to try to parse that out. So program participation, what exactly are the different things that they participate in? This is the Williamson Act, and this is an EQIP, and this is a conservation easement, conservation reserve program, USDA program, and then it drops off pretty significantly after that as far as participation in a whole variety of conservation programs. So that's the policy side of things, right? What incentives do people have that might shape their management decisions? And we have a couple of winners in California, and then a lot of programs that people don't know about or aren't even using. So what are we going to do next? Well, the conclusions, rangeland management has to be adaptable to spatial and temporal variability. Economics is sort of at the center of this in terms of managing risk across that space and time, but it's nested within networks, within policies, within social values. The way people mix management goals and practices and grazing strategies is complex, and we're going to try to untangle that. Not a huge use of the incentive programs, but next steps that we want to do, well, I should have another one up here, but the next big one is we're going to try to figure out what predicts people to have different goals, what are the linkages between the goals and the strategies, what are the variables about the enterprise, the values they have, the networks they participate in, that sort of thing is our next step. And then we're also, if we have time today during the field trip, we're going to be doing a more intense adaptive landscape management experiment here on the station, where we're going to try to actually give some land to folks to manage. Is in the best circumstances, from my view, we're going to hand it over and let some different groups of folks make decisions about exactly how to manage the land here, and then trace that decision process in conjunction with measuring all the ecosystem outcomes like Leslie showed you earlier. So that's it.